Welcome back, Scratchers. We have really been building out a full-fledged game, and maybe it's time to start thinking about these enemies that are just rushing towards us. Well, that could be fun. We might want to add some more challenge by having some planes that actually behave a little bit differently. So let's walk through how we can do that by picking another one of these sprites. So I'll go ahead and use a gold 0 and giving it a little bit more of an interesting technique of how it comes down towards us. So we can go ahead and take a look at the existing blue 0, and we'll probably follow a very similar pattern. And just like we did with our islands, we can copy that code into our sprite as a starting place. Now we need to evaluate what in this code we want to hold on to and what we want to tweak. Now, we want it to behave in a lot of ways the same way as any other sprite, or as the blue 0 did. So when we run into the player's plane, we want it to blow up. And when we run into a bullet, we want to blow up. So we can keep a lot of this code. If we switch to look at our P38, one of the things we do need to worry about is how do we handle blowing it up over here. So we could duplicate this stack of blocks and add it into our forever loop and say basically, okay, if we touch the blue 0, we do this. If we touch the gold 0, we do this. And especially if we wanted to have those interactions be different between the two, we could certainly do that. And you see that does work. Now the downside to this approach is this code is starting to get very long, and it's a lot to read through. And honestly, if we look at these two, these are exactly the same except for these two conditions, the touching conditions. Now if we look over in our operators blocks, you'll notice we have several things that have that diamond shape, including this Boolean and this Boolean or. How those, and also this not. How these actually work is the and checks is this side true and this side true, and if both of those are true, the whole thing evaluates to true. With an or, only one side needs to be true. Either this needs to be true, or this needs to be true, or the whole thing is true, or it's false. And not just flips the truthiness of whatever we put in here. So if it's not true, then it's false. If it's not false, then it's true. And what we could actually do is just use that or to say, if we touch a blue 0 or we touch a gold 0, then we're going to start the process of having our player explode. Let's see if that works for us. There you can see that behaved exactly like we expected. We got our player to blow up, we got the enemy to blow up, and we had all the behaviors. Now, our enemy planes are still flying exactly the same, so it's time to go back to our gold 0 and now talk about how we can make that a little bit different. So the core idea is we move this plane downwards, but now we can think about how could we move it to the left or right, and what would be interesting there. Would it be more interesting to have it always go to the left? And we could play with that, say, by changing in our motion the y value. For example, if we set this to 1, we'll get a diagonal motion out of our sprites. Oops. I need that to be x, not y. Let's fix that. And go ahead and change our x by a value. So as we move down, we will also change our y. There you can see now they're starting to drift to the left. That's actually kind of interesting. And we could do something similar with, say, our green 0 and have it go the other direction. So there's a lot of ways we can tweak very quickly some of these behaviors. Now another thing we could do is we could start looking at the mathematical operators. So if we scroll down in here, there are these functions available to us that bring some interesting things in, and especially sine and cosine. These are values. Sine and cosine are functions that, given a value, are going to return a number between -1 and +1. And as we increase this value, it's going to change that gradually. So I'm going to do a little bit of tweaking on how we set this up, and I'm going to base sine of the y position. So as we move down the screen, our y is going to change, and this could be fed into our x position. Rather than using the change x by, I'm going to actually set x to a value. So I'm going to pull that one out. Whoops. All right, we're going to put that back together, and then we're going to put this in here. Now if we run, notice our gold plane seems to be moving a little bit, but because we're only getting a value between 1 and -1 here, it's not going to move a whole lot. So the other thing we can do is we can scale that up by just multiplying it by a value. So let's go ahead and put this and say maybe multiply that by, try 10 to start with. So now as we run, we're going to see our planes start weaving back and forth, and we get some interesting effects there. The bigger we make this number, the more that weaving is going to be apparent. You can see now we have some planes that are doing their best to evade us, and it looks pretty good. You can play with sine and cosine. You can also play with some of the other functions that are in there. Each one of those functions creates essentially a line or a wave, a curve, based on values that are coming in. And we can use that to change how our planes behave. Now you have enough ideas potentially that you can go in and start tweaking some of these other sprites as well and start adding some interesting behaviors there that really don't need much tweaking to get you to where you might have some really cool things.